Fixing plasterboard sheets to a wall might seem like one of those scary jobs, a little bit too difficult to try, but it's not as hard as what you think. I'm going to show you how to fix off a timber stud wall as well as a masonry wall.
The tools you'll need are a drill, a Stanley knife, a broad knife, a T-square, sandpaper, a tape measure, a step ladder, a pencil, an automatic screw gun. And the materials you'll need are plasterboard sheets.
Okay, I'll be sheeting this section of stud wall right here. We already know our sheets are 1200 high, so I've got my marks right across there. Next thing I need to do is take a measurement of the length I need, transfer that measurement over onto my sheet, then I'm ready to cut. Okay, here's a little tip. I've got a couple of plasterboard offcuts which I'm just going to place here. Now this is going to allow me to start my sheeting about 10 mil off the floor, and this allows for any possible movement in the future in your floors. Okay, I've got my first sheet cut and ready to go on, but before I do that I'm going to save myself some pain. I've made a little mark along this section here to let me know exactly where my fixings need to go. The last thing I want to do is put my sheet up there, go to fix it off and miss timber. Okay, next step is to apply your stud adhesive. About every 300 mil or so, just a small 20 by 20 mil dab, except in your internal corners because we fix off the sheets using screws. On a standard stud wall, your studs are usually around 600 mil apart, and that's where you fix off your sheet with screws. We've got a cavity door that we're fixing to, so we're a bit limited for our fixing points. What we're going to do is fix the sheet around the outside at about 200 mil apart. Okay, because we're fixing to a cavity door slider, the last thing we want to do is have our screws bite too deep and end up scratching our door when we open and close it. So here's a little tradie tip. We're going to use an offcut here, we call it a lug. We'll place it over the top and just put our screw through there and fix it. That way your screw doesn't bite too deep. And these things will be removed later on once the adhesive's set. Okay, now we're ready for our top sheet, which the procedure is pretty much the same as the bottom sheet, we're just a little higher up. Righto, we've got an electrical fitting that goes right here, so we've got a small hole in the plasterboard to feed the wires through. It's a good idea to make that hole before the sheet goes up, otherwise you won't find the wire. Make sure when you're screwing off your plasterboard sheets that your screws are recessed into the plasterboard a little bit. That way, when you go to set it later on, you won't have any little screw heads hanging out. Okay, make sure your plasterboard joints are nice and flush and line up as close as possible, because that's going to make setting those joints later on a lot easier. When it comes to sheeting a masonry wall, measuring and cutting is exactly the same process. However, when it comes to fixing your sheets to the wall itself, the most crucial point is to make sure that you have a nice clean surface to work with. So if there's paint on your masonry wall, use an angle grinder, score it back a little bit, and then use a wet sponge to make it nice and clean. Now you don't want to apply too much pressure by hand, just get it there in position and lightly tapped. You want to apply pressure using your straight edge. That way we make sure that it's nice and level. There you go, plasterboard sheeting on a stud wall and a masonry wall. It's not as tough as you thought it was it?